I couldn't sleep. Not that it was unusual, but tonight felt different, like my restlessness had a voice, and it was whispering her name. I told myself it was ridiculous. She was my husband's friend, someone I shouldn't think about beyond polite conversation. But lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, her laugh kept echoing in my head, soft and warm, like it belonged somewhere it absolutely shouldn't. It started earlier that evening at the repair shop where I worked, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above us. I had been elbow deep in a transmission when she walked in. She had that confident, effortless presence that made you notice her without her trying. Mid-40s, sharp suit jacket slightly rolled at the sleeves, hair loose but perfectly styled, a coffee in one hand like she'd stepped straight out of someone else's world. She smiled at me, not the polite nod you give strangers, but something softer, almost curious, that made the air feel too small. "Hey," she said, tilting her head just slightly. Her eyes scanned the mess of tools and oil stains, then landed on me. There was a pause, a flicker of hesitation, like she was deciding whether to stay or leave. Can I help you?" I said, wiping my hands on a rag. She laughed quietly, that warm, almost conspiratorial sound. "I think I'll manage. But thank you for offering." Her gaze lingered on me a fraction too long, and I felt my stomach twist into something I couldn't name. I watched her move toward the counter, glancing at the brochures and manuals scattered there. Every small motion she made seemed deliberate, sliding her coffee cup just a little closer, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear, but natural, like she had always belonged in this chaotic little shop, even if she obviously didn't. I kept pretending to focus on the engine, pretending the heat crawling up my neck wasn't there. But she caught me looking, not with accusation, not with judgment, just a quiet acknowledgement, like she knew. That fleeting moment, the way her lips twitched into a tiny, private smile, made something click inside me. We didn't talk much after that. A few words exchanged here and there, light enough to be casual, heavy enough to be something else. She asked about the parts, about timing, about mundane things that shouldn't matter, but somehow they did. I found myself lingering over her words, tracing the curve of her voice in my mind. When she finally left, she paused at the door, turning back for a second. Our eyes met, and she raised a single eyebrow, playful and challenging, before stepping out into the night. The door closed with a soft click, and I realized I hadn't breathed properly in a while. Now, hours later, I'm lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying that glance, that pause, that half-smile. It shouldn't mean anything, and yet it feels like everything. I can't stop thinking about the way she tilted her head, how the corners of her mouth lifted without really saying anything. The way she left a space in the room that wasn't empty, a kind of quiet invitation that I don't know if I'm ready to accept. And somehow, impossibly, that single glance has me more awake than any coffee could ever hope to. The next time I saw her, it was at the little bookstore tucked between the corner cafe and the laundromat. I wasn't supposed to be there, but something about the way she had lingered in my mind kept me wandering streets I didn't normally care to walk. She was leaning over the counter, flipping through a stack of journals, and for a moment, she didn't notice me. Her hands caught my attention first, long, elegant fingers, knuckles faintly pale from gripping the edges of the paper. She rubbed the back of her neck, and I saw the faint crease there, the tension that seemed permanent these days. She laughed quietly at something in the journal, a soft sound that felt unguarded, almost private. And just like that, I realized how tired she looked. Eyelids a little heavy, lines around her eyes more pronounced than before, like she'd been carrying a weight I couldn't name. I cleared my throat. "Hey, didn't expect to see you here." She glanced up, startled for half a second, then composed herself. The smile she gave was small, polite, not quite reaching her eyes. "I needed a break. Too many things piled up," she said, her tone light, almost dismissive, but I caught the slight tremor, the hesitation behind the words. We fell into an easy rhythm, though I was careful not to overstep. I helped her reach a stack of books from the top shelf. My hand brushed hers for the briefest second. She didn't pull away, but her fingers lingered near mine, tense and cautious. "You're always organized," I said, attempting something casual, something that would keep her comfortable. She shook her head, looking down at the floor. I try to be. Doesn't always work. Her voice had that quiet fragility now, the kind that pulled at something I hadn't expected. I watched her, noticing the subtle gestures she tried to hide. The way she tucked stray strands of hair behind her ear. The way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, as if carrying more than just herself. There was a pause, a sliver of silence between us that stretched longer than it should have. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing seemed right. Then she did something small, almost imperceptible. She reached for a cup of coffee someone had left on the counter and sipped it slowly, staring off toward the window. And in that quiet, vulnerable moment, I realized she wasn't just tired. She was holding back, keeping herself distant, shielding whatever it was I could only sense but not yet touch. I didn't mean to bother you. I murmured, my voice quieter than usual. She glanced at me then, and for a heartbeat, the guard cracked just a little. Her lips twitched into a near smile, fleeting, private, but enough. You're not bothering me, she said softly. Then she turned her attention back to the journals, but something had shifted. The air between us felt different, charged, subtle, like static on a cool morning. I stayed a little longer than necessary, helping her sort the stack. My hand brushed hers again, and this time, neither of us moved away immediately. Just a breath, a shared glance, a quiet understanding that neither word nor action could fully explain. When I finally left, the image of her there, small, delicate, trying to be invisible yet impossible to ignore, stayed with me. I couldn't shake it. I walked away, but her tired eyes, the curve of her smile, the tremor in her hands, they followed me, like something gently pulling at the edges of my thoughts. And I knew, even then, that this was far from over. It was late when I found myself still at the workshop, the storm outside painting the windows in streaks of rain. She had come by, ostensibly to pick up a replacement part, but there was something in the way she lingered near the shelves that made my stomach knot. I didn't think anyone would still be here, she said, voice low, almost drowned by the patter of rain. I like the quiet, I admitted, trying to keep my tone casual. Fewer mistakes when no one's around. She laughed softly, and I noticed the tension in her shoulders eased just slightly. I wanted to reach out, to brush that worry away, but I stayed still, telling myself restraint was the right choice. Yet proximity has a way of bending rules. She bent over to inspect a part on the lower shelf, and for a moment our arms brushed. Not enough to be noticed by anyone else, but enough to send a jolt straight through me. I froze, pretending to adjust a tool, counting the seconds until she straightened. There was a pause, a quiet silence that wasn't empty. Her eyes caught mine across the bench, and I swear for a heartbeat, she almost said something. Almost let herself drop the polite veneer and admit the thing I felt too, but the words didn't come. Instead, her phone rang, sharp and intrusive. She glanced at the screen, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. It's my ex. I should. She trailed off, covering the receiver with her hand, as if the conversation was already too complicated to explain. She hesitated, then let it ring out. Not important, she muttered. I nodded, but I could feel the shift, the unspoken weight of someone else's presence, someone invisible but heavy. It made the space between us smaller, tighter, somehow more charged. I wanted to say something, anything, to anchor the moment, but restraint had its claws deep in me. She leaned against the counter, just enough to brush against me again as she reached for a part, and the air between us thickened. Her fingers trembled slightly, whether from the storm, the tension, or something I had no right to wonder about. I couldn't tell. My own hands itched to close the gap, but I forced them to hang limply at my sides, pretending to tighten a bolt. For a moment, we just existed in that shared space, breathing quietly, measuring our impulses, the storm outside echoing the storm inside. I wanted to reach out, to touch, to say the thing we were both holding back, but the sound of the rain and the pull of propriety held me in place. Then she moved to step back, and the fragile tension snapped into motion. Her hand lingered just a fraction too long on the shelf, our shoulders almost touching as she turned, eyes flicking toward mine. I caught that glance, that tiny hesitation, the unspoken promise of something that could happen if we dared, but didn't. When she finally left, rain dripping from her coat, I was left alone with the storm and the echo of what almost was. And I knew, with a quiet, sinking certainty, that the memory of her touch, her gaze, the trembling pause, it would follow me longer than the rain would. The shop was empty again, the low hum of fluorescent lights filling the gaps where conversation should have been. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, looking out the window at the gray sky, and I realized I hadn't said a word since she arrived. Words felt heavy tonight, or maybe it was the weight of everything unspoken between us. "I don't know why I keep coming here," she said finally, voice low, almost a whisper. I swallowed. I wanted to say something casual, something safe, but nothing fit. So I just nodded, pretending to tighten a bolt I'd already finished. She turned then, finally meeting my eyes. Her expression was raw, unfiltered, and for a moment I felt like I was looking at someone I didn't really know. "I mean, what are we doing?" she asked. The words weren't a confession, not yet, but they were a crack in the wall she'd built. I opened my mouth, then closed it. There were no easy answers. My heart thudded, loud enough that I was certain she could hear it. The storm outside had quieted, but inside me, everything was loud. "I don't know," I admitted at last, my voice barely above a whisper. It sounded feeble even to me, but it was honest. And honesty, I realized, had been missing from every glance, every brush of our hands. She sighed, shifting her weight. Her fingers twitched against the counter, betraying some tension she hadn't let me see before. We can't keep pretending," she said, her tone calm, almost resigned, but the tremor in her voice said otherwise. I wanted to reach out, wanted to bridge the distance between us, to make sense of the electricity that had been crackling for weeks. But I stayed still, knowing that moving closer would speak volumes words could never carry. Silence stretched between us, long and suffocating. I studied the little details, the faint line between her brows, the way her jaw tightened when she swallowed, the way her eyes seemed to search mine for something she couldn't name. Every movement, every pause, was louder than any touch could have been. "I don't want to ruin things," she added softly. And just like that, the words hung in the air, heavier than anything she could have whispered in a moment of passion. They weren't romantic, not yet. They were honest, terrifying, and completely destabilizing. I wanted to tell her I understood. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that everything already felt ruined. But I couldn't. The truth was too dangerous, too unsteady, and I wasn't sure either of us could handle it yet. She exhaled, the sound breaking something inside me. "Maybe we should just stop pretending this is normal," she said, her gaze falling to the floor. Her fingers traced invisible patterns along the edge of the counter, and I watched them like they were a secret I was never meant to touch. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to argue, to convince her that nothing had to change. But I stayed frozen, caught between wanting and fearing, knowing that whatever came next would alter the fragile balance we'd been holding for weeks. And then she said it. So quietly I almost missed it, but the words struck harder than a scream. "I think we're both in over our heads." I wasn't expecting her to open up that night. We were in the back office, the dim desk lamp cutting shadows across her face. I'd been sorting invoices, pretending that organization could keep my hands from trembling, when she finally spoke. "I never really got over him," she said quietly, almost as if testing the words in the air before letting them exist. My head snapped up, and I caught her eyes, shimmering in the lamplight, filled with something I couldn't name but recognized immediately: regret. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent, letting her speak first. "He left years ago. Didn't matter what I did or said. I kept thinking I could fix it, but Her voice cracked, then steadied again. She looked down, fingers fiddling with the edge of the desk. I never really let myself move on. The truth hit me like a sudden weight. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that everyone carries ghosts, but something about the fragility in her posture made me hesitate. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, watching her, noticing the tremor in her hands, the slight slump in her shoulders. Vulnerable. Real. She pulled out a small envelope from her bag, almost reluctantly, and set it on the desk between us. I glanced at it, curious, but she shook her head. "It's nothing you need to see," she murmured. But I did see it. Something in her expression, a faint quiver of lips, the way her eyes lingered on the envelope as if it held her entire past, told me it was more than nothing. I resisted the urge to reach for it, knowing she wasn't ready, knowing that patience might be the only thing keeping me in her orbit without breaking her fragile trust. "I lost someone once too," I said softly, just enough to meet her gaze without pushing. "Someone I thought I'd never get past. But you carry pieces of them with you, even when you think you've buried them." Her eyes flickered, just a moment, and I saw recognition there, not just of loss, but of understanding. It wasn't comfort, it was acknowledgement. The kind that unsettles you because it's too precise, too accurate, too intimate to ignore. She exhaled slowly, and the tiniest smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "I didn't mean to unload this on you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "It's just hard sometimes, carrying things alone." I wanted to tell her she didn't have to, that maybe she didn't have to carry them alone anymore, but the words lodged in my throat. So instead, I nodded, letting the silence stretch between us. Quiet, heavy, real. Then, almost imperceptibly, she reached across the desk, placing her hand near mine, not touching, just close enough. Close enough to shake something inside me I wasn't ready to name, but close enough to know that she'd allowed me to exist in that space with her. And in that brief, soft moment, the world shifted. Nothing had happened, yet everything felt different. Something fragile had broken open, something we couldn't unsee, unrecoil from. She pulled back, clearing her throat. "I should go," she murmured. And I watched her walk away, leaving the envelope behind, leaving me with a pulse in my chest I couldn't quiet, and the quiet knowledge that nothing would ever feel the same again. The shop was quieter than usual, the hum of the fluorescent lights soft, almost gentle. She had come by to pick up the last of the parts she needed, but this time, neither of us pretended the air between us was ordinary. We worked in tandem, side by side, organizing tools, moving boxes, simple tasks that suddenly felt charged. Her movements were familiar now, effortless, but I noticed the small details, the curve of her neck as she bent, the way her fingers lingered on a wrench just a moment longer than necessary, the faint scent of her perfume that followed her like a quiet announcement. I wanted to speak, to verbalize the tension that had been threading between us for weeks, but every time I opened my mouth, the words felt wrong. Instead, I let my presence speak for me, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, she let hers speak back. She straightened, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and our eyes met. No theatrics, no heavy breathing, just a soft acknowledgement of everything that had passed, the glances, the pauses, the unspoken confessions. I felt my chest tighten, not from desire, exactly, but from the intimacy of being allowed in. Allowed to exist in this space with her, not as a friend, not as a stranger, but as someone she trusted enough to let close. She moved to grab a box from the shelf, and our hands brushed. Not accidental, not fleeting. I didn't pull away. She didn't either. Just a slow, deliberate touch, the kind that says more than words ever could. My fingers lingered near hers, feeling the warmth, the quiet electricity, the simple proof that we were both here, present, choosing this. The silence stretched between us, comfortable now, filled with understanding rather than tension. I found myself smiling, a small, genuine thing, and she returned it. A faint curve of lips that carried relief, acknowledgement, and maybe a little disbelief that we had made it this far without everything unraveling. She leaned back against the counter, just enough for our shoulders to almost meet, and I realized I didn't want to break the moment. I didn't want words. I didn't want declarations. This quiet presence, the shared space, the mutual acceptance, was enough. For the first time, I noticed how natural it felt, how inevitable. Not perfect, not safe, but honest. Our connection wasn't a fireworks moment. It was a slow burn that had finally reached its warmth, a heat earned through restraint, observation, and the fragile patience of understanding each other's ghosts. Her gaze flicked toward mine, just briefly, and I reached out, letting my hand settle over hers on the counter. Not a grasp, not a demand, just a gentle, grounding touch that sealed the hours, days, weeks of tension into a quiet certainty. She didn't pull away. She didn't have to. And for the first time, I allowed myself to simply breathe in the moment, to feel the weight of everything unspoken but understood, everything forbidden but acknowledged. No promises, no declarations. Just this, two people, finally aligned in the quiet, fragile truth that they belonged here, together, for now, in the only way that truly mattered. She exhaled softly, leaning back against the counter, and I felt it, too. The subtle collapse into understanding, into closeness, into something undeniable. And the shop stayed quiet, our hands resting near each other. The hum of lights the only witness to what had finally settled between us. It's been weeks since that night in the shop. The quiet one where nothing dramatic happened, but everything shifted. I still catch myself replaying it in my mind. Her hand near mine, the soft exhale, the way the silence between us wasn't empty, but full of something I couldn't name then. I've changed. I notice details now I might have missed before. The way she laughs quietly when she thinks no one's watching, the slight tension in her shoulders when she's carrying too much, the way her eyes soften when she looks at someone she trusts. And I see myself differently, too. More patient, more aware, willing to wait for moments that matter instead of rushing to fill every silence with words. She's changed, too, I think. There's a subtle lightness in her now, the kind that comes from letting someone in, from not having to carry everything alone. She doesn't pretend anymore that the weight isn't there, but she moves with it differently, with a quiet confidence I hadn't noticed before. We haven't said, "I love you," not in words, not yet. But there's something stronger in that, something earned in silence, in restraint, in tiny touches and unspoken acknowledgement. We've learned that closeness doesn't always need declarations. Sometimes it's just shared space, a gentle brush of hands, the willingness to exist in the same fragile moment without pretending it's normal. I've come to understand that love isn't always a rush or a confession or a sudden leap. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's subtle. And sometimes it's enough to change everything without ever needing to shout. Every time I think of her now, it's with warmth rather than ache. The restlessness that used to keep me awake at night has softened into something steady, like the hum of the lights in the shop, a quiet presence that reminds me of what matters, what's real. I don't know what comes next, or how long we'll have this fragile equilibrium, but I do know one thing. I wouldn't trade it for certainty or for words that might ruin what we've slowly built. And in the end, maybe that's the lesson we've both learned. That love isn't about fireworks or grand gestures. It's about patience. It's about noticing the small things. It's about letting someone exist next to you, fully and imperfectly, and letting that be enough. So, if you've ever felt the weight of someone's presence without a single word, or the quiet pull of something you can't yet name, well, maybe you know exactly what I mean. And maybe, just maybe, you'll let it linger a little longer like I did.